You're listening to CoAngler's Garage podcast number 3 with Noah Dickneite, the second place finisher in the 2025 Toyota Series Pro-Am at Kentucky Lake. Okay, welcome to CoAngler's Garage, everybody. This is our third episode and our first from east of the Rockies. And I'm super psyched to have Noah Dickneite with us today, who recently finished in second at Kentucky Lake in the Toyota Series. Noah let me know that he's been fishing with his dad in the Ozarks for basically as long as he can remember. And I think you fished your first BFL in 2018, if I remember correctly, at the age of 17, and then has fished about 20 MLF events, I believe, and recently has just been lighting it up in the Plains division. So Noah, welcome to the show. It's really exciting to have you on here.
I really appreciate it, Matt. I'm happy to be here. Love any chance I get to talk about some fishing.
Yeah, great. So you're in the right place. And I'd love to hear a little bit about kind of how you began as a co-angler. And obviously you started in your teens and how that was and how your fishing has evolved.
So I mean, like behind me, this is my dad's trophy case. We're working on a place to put this one, but you know, I grew up in the Ozarks. My dad has won an MLF event at the BFL level on Lake of the Ozarks, Table Rock, Truman. Yeah, and I mean those are basically the big three as far as most Ozark fishermen are concerned around. Here close to Lake of the Ozarks, I should put it. And
Yeah.
I grew up, and as soon as my dad could realize that I actually cared about what was going on, anytime he couldn't find a tournament partner, I was always in the back of the boat. I mean, it started at like 10 years old. I actually think I fished my first Anglers in Action, which is a bigger tournament trail up here. I think I fished one at 10 years old, and it was in March. It was cold, and I fished my little butt off the whole time. But
That's awesome.
I mean, my whole goal has just been to just I love it so much. I want to get outside this shadow. It's a big one to grow, but it's no step too high for a high stepper.
So your dad obviously is no slouch on the Ozark lakes.
Yeah, I mean it's just no, you're perfectly fine. I mean there's certain things that I have learned, I would say, above the qualifications of your average angler, just because I've like at 23 years old, I've done it for basically my entire life. As long as I've been bass fishing, I know how to flip a dock.
Yeah.
Like it's been hammered into my head, and but outside of that, it's just the very first BFL I fished was on Lake Darnell in I was 17 years old, and the only reason I fished was because that particular year the Archie division was kind of having some struggles getting co-anglers to sign up. So my dad needed a link, and my dad has I think it's actually right here. He fished a Bassmaster Championship, and he got fourth place in it. He's always down at Lake Darnell, and he's always just had a good history down there. He likes fishing down there, but he couldn't find a co-angler link, and he was just like, "No, I'll sign your waiver if you want to go." And I was like, "Heck yeah, just sign me up. Let's get her done." And I caught a keeper. Nothing crazy, but to fish my first event and to have a keeper from the back of the boat, I was pretty stoked. And in all honesty, as a co-angler from the back of the boat especially, I can say that I can legitimately say that I fished the first 2 full seasons I ever fished from the back of the boats. I never had an event that I didn't catch a keeper in. And
yeah, that's great.
Especially at a young age, I think that's something you just don't hear a lot of, is because especially like talk to older anglers in the bag line all the time. They just be like, "Oh, that's trickle in here pretty soon. Like you're gonna have one of those days." And I think it took, I think it was like my ninth or tenth event when I finally just had one of those days where I blanked. But
Yeah.
that's a part of it. That's a part of fishing from the back of the boat. Even on your home waters. Sometimes it's just tough and the fish don't bite. That's part of it.
Yep. And sorry, we got a little bit of a delay, so I think sometimes I may jump in at a moment where you're still talking, and
No,
that may happen
you're.
here and there. So, you obviously you're pretty consistent from the back of the boat, given the way
I
that's been going at a young age. What is it?
Well,
Is there anything that, other than just being a great fisherman, that leads to that? Do you think?
growing up, my dad told me, like, specifically, I would say very specifically, growing up dock fishing from the back of the boat, I got
Yeah.
told so many times at like, and I'm not joking, from like 8 to 13 years old, I heard the story so many times of my dad being frustrated of a Coangler throwing way up in front of his boat, like,
Hmm.
and you know what, we all get anxious, like I've even done it, and even like, and we can touch on this later, but in today's forward facing sonar era, there's a lot of guys that just don't care where you throw as long as you don't throw over their line.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
but throwing ahead to a different target was always something that my dad stressed to me was just something that he had an issue with as a pro. Because he watched so many big fish get caught that way. And I'm
Yeah.
not condoning that behavior from the back of the boat. I have to say that.
Yeah.
But like growing
Yeah.
up that way, I always made it a point when I fished with him, especially around docks. You're not left much, but
Hmm.
what you're left with, you have to notice what the person in the front of the boat is doing and elaborate on it. You've got to go deeper. You've got to go deeper. Whether it's, you know, I'm going to throw over the side of the dock into the boat well because he didn't do that. And,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yep.
and that's another thing I was raised on is like, it doesn't really matter where you got to throw it. You got to get the bite first. Like, you got to worry about getting the bite before you can worry about getting the fish. And so that's another
Yep.
thing is like, if you're if you got a DT10 tied on and it's 4 foot of water, I mean, that's what you're working with, and don't worry about it until it's a problem.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
So
a that's a
you,
big mentality.
yeah, yeah. Cool. So since we're talking about docks, and obviously you've got some experience on some lakes where docks certainly play a pretty significant role in a lot of tournaments there,
Yeah,
multiple times, parts of the year. Um, I'm curious. I know sometimes on Lake of the Ozarks, certain patterns people fish with lighter line. Some people fishing around docks where I'm from in the West. Most of the time, if you're doing that sort of thing at a place like Clear Lake, there's a school of thought that heavier line makes sense. You try to put it in those places like you're talking about, where you get the bite first, and then you worry about getting them out. But there are also some guys that fish really light line around the docks. I'm curious in your part of the country how that plays out, or how you do it.
so there's actually a couple different instances where that comes to mind, and
Yeah.
especially like, I mean, talking about Toyota series, there's going to be one in September this year, and
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we're going to talk about that.
September, and September is a month, and just like historically speaking, I think it was, um I don't know, it's been a little while ago, but there was an open event there, and one of the top anglers did really good fishing around an area where there was a lot of release fish, and he was drop shotting around docks in brush piles, which, I mean, to like most of
Yeah.
us, we're like, okay, why aren't you throwing something bigger in there, beef it up a little bit.
Yeah.
But I
And
mean,
this was from the front of the boat or a co-angler?
from the front of the boat.
Okay, got it.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
but Yeah, I mean, there are definitely instances. There's a particular angler that I'm fortunate to kind of know that I would say his strong point is like he can find a shaky head or a drop shot bite behind you, like as a boater, as a pro.
Mm-hmm.
um
Yeah.
he'll it doesn't bother him to watch someone go down his favorite area to fish. He's going to go right behind you with like a drop shot or a shaky head, and he's going to catch him behind you. And there's not a lot of guys down here that do that, but it's definitely happened in big ways in the past.
Yeah. So do you on Lake of the Ozarks and other places, do you fish in a kind of finessey style around the docks when you're fishing from the back of the boat?
So particularly for me,
Yeah.
uh the Lake of the Ozarks, the dock pattern more applies to current, and there's only certain fishermen that are actually going to go and fish the dock. A lot of fishermen, especially in today's day and age, are fishing what's underneath the dock. They're fishing a brush pile or
Yeah.
something similar to that. um the the particular like real like the dock bite, when the fish is just underneath the dock, and again kind of going into the September thing, is like the fish are going to suspend. Are the fish in the top half of the water column, are they on the bottom, are they all the
Mm-hmm.
way up underneath the floats? And so my big thing is like if I'm watching my boater flip underneath this dock with a jig, and I'm throwing a jig because I personally like I, I like to I like to fish. I like my beef. Um,
Okay.
but uh, I've done a little bit of the finesse fishing around the docks, but for the most part, I just those are the Ozark fish just respond better to a bigger profile, if you ask me.
Okay. And so I lost you there at the very end, but a bigger profile to you means, does that mean a jig? Does that mean a swim bait?
Um,
What might that mean?
so particular to me is like I really like a big brush hog. That's
Okay.
or like a
Yeah.
magnum trick worm.
Got it.
A 10 inch a
Yeah.
10 inch old monster, or a big jig like a half ounce jig, 3/8 ounce jig. And some of that
Mm-hmm.
stuff, like particularly the brush hog, is a bait that Dennis Bearhorst, who's a well-known name as a pro, around here we know him because he was one of the first guys to get really good at skipping a brush hog underneath the docks, and that was just a
Okay.
bait the fish hadn't seen underneath there, and he absolutely kicked some butt for a couple of years skipping a brush hog up underneath docks just because other people couldn't do it
Yeah.
because it's a more difficult bait to skip.
Yep.
I really think, especially with the dockfish up here, I think, just learning what I've learned, the biggest thing that you can do behind someone is change your profile and change what area of the water column you're fishing in. If they're flipping up
Yeah.
underneath there and they're staying at the top, you go to the bottom. If they're going to the bottom, swim it in. And I don't care if it's a Senko, a worm, or a jig, just swim it in. It's just fish a different water column. That is
Yeah.
my biggest tip on docks, like around here.
Yep. And I think, to be honest, that's probably something that holds from the back of the boat. No matter where you are, you ultimately have to fish for different fish than the guy on
Yeah,
the front of the
yeah,
boat. In the,
absolutely.
95% of the time. I mean, maybe there's a few exceptions, but
Yeah,
you got to fish for a different type of fish. So that's super important. And I'm glad you made that point. Um, let's, maybe we'll circle back around to Lake of the Ozarks in September towards the end of our
yeah,
conversation,
yeah. That's
but
fine.
let's talk a little bit about Kentucky Lake. So I want this to kind of be the meat of the conversation. I looked at some of the numbers from there. It looked like you on day one started out with a little bit of a tougher day. I
Yeah.
think you had like 7.5 pounds, and then had
Hmm.
an awesome day two with
It
I
was
think
incredible.
17 and a quarter. Um, and at that point, you were in second place with 24-12, but you were 5.5 pounds back from Dan
Yeah.
Bowman, who ultimately won the tournament, who I imagine you may or may not know. He's from
Yep.
from
He
uh,
lives
Lake of the
20
Ozarks,
minutes
right?
from me.
Yeah.
Yep. That was actually
So
one thing. That was actually one thing we were kind of talking about at the end of day two. We were kind of looking at, like Roger Fitzpatrick is a name on the pro side that I've known for a long time, and Brad Jelinek is actually someone I fished in the back of the boat of. He was somebody
well,
that was doing good on the pro side. Um, and and there was a lot of Ozark co-anglers that were up there in the top, and we were just kind of walking around and not to toot our own horn, but we were talking amongst ourselves, just like, hey, the Ozark boys are kind of killing it down here. It felt good to be winning away from home, I guess.
yeah, that's awesome. Do you think there was anything in particular about the way that tournament set up that led to you guys doing so well?
So myself in particular,
Mm-hmm.
so I fished 2 days of practice with my dad. My dad fished the event, and we had found some fish in practice. We actually had another co-angler that practiced with us as well, and unfortunately for him, I do think he ended up getting a check, but he actually kicked our butts in practice. I mean, like, he literally just
Really?
came out and showed us what was going on, and for the most part, it was what we had found was a good Carolina rig bite.
Mm-hmm.
But for both of us being co-anglers, it was just like, if we get around the area to throw it, we'll be able to catch some. We should be able to catch some fish on it, but it's just luck of the draw.
Yeah.
Um, but the whole time we were down there in practice, every spot we caught a fish at, um, everywhere I looked, all I could see in my head was Truman Lake.
Okay.
Everything that we were fishing was just like Truman Lake, which I've, like, again, growing up in a fishing family, like I was kind of talking to you earlier about, like the Dickneite side of my family, even before I was born, even before my dad was married, they took family vacations once a year in August, and they would go to a lake. We've done
Mm-hmm.
Stockton Lake here in Missouri. They've gone to, I don't think they ever went to Palm Terre. They've done Truman Lake for like 10 or 15 years. They've gone to Lake of the Ozarks before. But like Truman Lake was somewhere that like I grew up fishing. It was just one of those places that, and like looking around, all I could see was water and bushes. The water's dirty. There's pea gravel and mud everywhere. It was just like, I felt, in all honesty, it kind of felt like home. In the way that we were catching fish too, especially, it was just like, this is home. Like, it just felt like a flooded body of water with the current going, which is usually when you can find a great bite on Truman Lake.
That's awesome.
And
So you fished it in kind of a similar way that you would there, at least with what you were presented with on the different days.
I I would have to say 100%. Like
Yeah.
what I did for 3 days in a row, given the circumstances, is exactly what I would have done on Truman Lake.
Cool.
And
So and
it was kind of crazy.
yeah. So maybe if you can talk us through day 1, day 2, day 3 a little bit. And again, as I tell everybody, our goal here is not to give up what the guys in the front of the boat were,
Yeah,
exactly where they're fishing, and say things we shouldn't say. But to the extent that you're comfortable with it, I do think our goal here is to try to, share, decisions you made, things you did that you feel comfortable sharing in the hope that we can all as co-anglers get better,
yeah,
fishing tournaments,
ab-
if that makes sense.
absolutely. So, the first day I drew a local guy, and he had actually told me, he was like, he said, "Man, the smallmouth were really firing. I'm kind of worried. He said he fished a tournament the week before, and he had gotten second place in it with 24.5 pounds of smallmouth. And he was the whole time, like, I can get into. I'll get to that story in a second. But
Yeah.
he was just he was just talking about how the flooding, the immense flooding that we had that week, and the extreme change in overall watercolor. I mean, it went to like from clear to chocolate mud in a matter of 2 days, as far as I knew. And he said he found
And sorry, did that happen before you practiced, or did it change
that
while you were
happened.
there?
That happened right before practice, like the basically the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday leading into that week. We just had, I mean, like, and we even got some of it in Missouri. I mean, we just had a torrential downpour. I mean, it was just, I mean, I think Kentucky, like where we were at in Kentucky, I think they got 10 inches of rain. I mean, just a drowning. I can say this too. In practice, one day during practice, Dad had said he wanted to go to Paris, and we went down there. But just taking Google Maps, the quickest route, it was, and this is a good thing we did it too. But the evening that we got down there, Saturday evening, it was still raining, and we unhooked the boat at the cabin, and we just drove down there in the truck, and we crossed over water over the road 6 times. I mean,
Wow.
the flooding was crazy, and all of this water was obviously going into Kentucky Lake. And so as
Yeah.
anglers, also kind of looking at this, you're like, well, I mean, it's not going to change. It, if anything, it might get worse.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
but going into day one, I drew a guy that said he found a pocket where it seemed like the fish were adjusting to the bushes, and he was gonna try and fish, kind of do some power fishing pretty shallow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Joe was his name, and I'm not joking. On the guy's like 12th cast, he caught almost a 7 pounder. It was the biggest bass of the tournament. Um, and again, okay, so circling back to earlier, he caught that fish, first fish of the day. I mean, like right off the get go. I said, does that make you excited? And he just looked back at me and he goes, honestly, no, I'm still scared somebody's going to go out there and be catching all those big smallmouth.
Yeah.
And, come to find out, look at day three,
Yep.
somebody was out there catching those big smallmouth.
Yep. For sure. Yep.
So he catches that big fish early on in the day, and I'm immediately like, all right, he's a local guy. Obviously, he's put me around some big fish.
Yep.
And he was power fishing. There was a lot of guys in the front of the boat doing the spinnerbait chatterbait thing, and so just me thinking in my head, he's fishing like all these bushes, but he's fishing them faster. So if you're fishing from the front of the boat, in my head anyway, he's leaving plenty of fish behind. He's
Mm-hmm.
fishing fast. Only the most reactive fish are going to go get it. And he caught a fish that looked like it had a bloody tail. They might have been spawning. As the female leaves, there should be a male be left behind.
Yep.
So I was just flipping, and
Yeah.
I ended up grabbing 3 keepers flipping. And I did have one really good fish that day. I think it was like 3 3/4, almost 4 pounds.
Yeah.
um but my boat of the first day had, I think I think it was either the first 5 fish he put in the boat, or he made one cull, and he had 21, 15, almost 22 pounds. He was in second place.
Wow.
So that's just the start of like your boaters putting you on him. Like if he's on him, you're gonna be around him. You just gotta, even if he's the only one that's starting to catch him and you haven't gotten a bite yet, you're on the fish. Just fish with confidence.
Yep. So that's awesome. It's so important to, in getting a finish like you had, not only to, to fish clean and do a great job, but sometimes, the draws are important too. And I noticed,
Oh,
it looked
for
like
sure.
you had like, I think he may have finished in 12th or something like that.
Hmm.
And then your draw the second day finished in 16th. and then obviously you're fishing with somebody pretty impressive the last day.
Yeah,
We're,
I
we're go ahead.
I'll
Sorry.
just no, but not to interrupt, but going into each day, the first day, I drew a local that had recently gotten second in a tournament. To me,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna call that top 10 certified. I did not enter a day of the event without somebody that was in the top 10 that day.
Wow.
That that's
So you
gonna
knew
make a
you knew
diff
you were going
that
to be around them.
yeah, that makes a big difference on how you approach the day. For me anyway, that makes a huge difference on how I approach the day. Um,
Yep. Yep.
but
The only time that's, in my opinion, the only time that's not a great thing is if they're all vacuum cleaners. And
oh,
and it's
don't
a
get me wrong,
scenario where
you definitely have those days. Like you
yeah.
definitely have those days. Like that's again kind of where mentally I felt lucky that when I drew Joe the first day, we were going through all these shallow areas where obviously there was fish, but he was power fishing and he was determined to power fish.
It-
And I mean, he
yeah, and
did
he was
catch fish.
leaving some stuff.
Yeah, I mean, and he did catch fish. I mean, quite literally almost all day. He just
Yeah.
didn't catch a lot of fish that helped him because, he literally put six keepers in the boat and had almost 22 pounds. It's kind of hard to help yourself from there.
Yep.
He probably caught,
Totally.
I would say 8 or 10 keepers that day, but just mentally, and that was even a thing. Is like, as for myself, I'm kind of a bubbly personality, but you got to make conversation on the water
I
too.
never
Is
would have
like,
known.
I appreciate it, but no, you got to make conversation on the water. So that was one thing. Like he was four keepers deep, and I literally had not gotten a bite yet. And I just asked him. I said, if you were fishing a team tournament today, I said, what would you be wanting the guy in the back of the boat to be doing? He said, just keep doing what you're doing. And that's another thing. Is like you can kind of draw personalities too. I drew Joe the first day, I drew Yukihiro the second day, and I drew Fisher the third day, and all three
Hmm.
of them were just fantastic people to be in a boat with, just as willing to share information as you could possibly get. Anything I asked them, they answered very willingly.
That's
And
awesome.
that's another thing that just like helps the flow of the day. You just you don't get down. There's no bad blood.
Yep.
You're just fishing.
Yep. That makes sense. And I can imagine, given the personality that you're showing, that you've probably had some experiences in the boat where the guy in the front of the boat's getting down a little bit, and maybe by trying to keep the vibe up in the boat, it actually
Oh yeah.
turns into a little bit better of a day. I think that's
Well,
important from the back of the boat
so
sometimes.
I also think it's funny that you said that because when Joe put that fish in the boat the first day and it was a 612.
Yeah.
When I put it in the net and we got it over the side of the boat, he just like stone faced me. And he was just like he puts the fish in the box and he just looks up and he goes, I don't know if you can tell, but I don't get very excited. And I was just like, I mean, I was in the back of the boat. I was just shaking from netting it. I was just like, man, piss on that. I was like, this is day one. You just put a freaking giant in the boat. Let's go. Like, I'll get excited for
Yeah,
you.
you're more excited for him. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
I, I'll be that guy every time. I'll be your hype man in the back of the boat.
Yeah.
And in all
Yeah.
honesty, I hate to say it, but um, I would say that was probably one of the better roles I played for Fisher on the third day. I mean, I was just for back lack for a better way to put it, from the back of the boat, one of the best things you can do is just stroke the ego. Whether it's a bad ego
Yeah.
or a good ego, you know, let them know they're killing it. Especially like if they're killing it, just let them know. I mean, it's the best thing you can do because especially if you're not trying to be mean about it or like, come on, let me have
Yep.
some of these fish.
Yep.
They're
Totally.
gonna turn around and they're gonna be like, hey man, they're right over there, throw over there. Or like, hey, if I were
100%.
you, I would try one of these. Or they might even give you something to throw. Like that that's something that if you control your positive outlook, it'll be accepted.
Yep. Yep. Those are wise words. So tell us a little bit about day two. You fished with Yukihiro, you said.
Yeah.
How'd that go? And you had a monster bag that day.
Oh my gosh. That was one of those things where, in all honesty, like days 2 and 3 of the event, especially, and this is kind of hard to say finishing in second, but I just like on day 2, I really think I had the potential for maybe a 20-pound bag. On day 3, I think I and Fisher gave still kind of texts me and gives me hell about it sometimes, but I probably had 6 keepers get off on the last day. I mean, I
Oh,
definitely had opportunities to cull, and I mean, I never got down on myself. I was still grateful to be in the position I was in, but I just was like, man, it's just tough. I just a lot of long casts, and I don't know, fish were getting off, fighting hard, that's for sure.
yeah. And were those smallmouth?
Um, I did I did lose one fish on the second day that I thought was a big smallmouth.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of saw a flash. I never really got a good look at
Yeah,
it, but
got it.
the way it was fighting, it kind of came up and I saw a little flash, and then it took me down, and it got me around a bush that was flooded, and it just broke me off.
Yeah.
But so going around day 2, um, Yuki Yukihiro told me he told me he refers to himself by hero, so that's what I'm gonna call him from
Okay.
now on.
Sure.
Um, but he had told me the night before he was in 8th after day 1. He had like
Yeah.
18 something. He had a pretty good bag. That
Yeah.
was definitely something that I was just like, wow, okay, like let's go see what's going on, because if he's doing
Mm-hmm.
finesse, this kind of goes back to my Lake of the Ozarks thing. Is like, well, I mean, if you're gonna leave me my big stuff behind you, like I'm gonna probably try that. Um,
Yeah.
which I ended up not doing, but that was, a positive outlook I had going into the day. But and he was kind of, I would hate to actually give away the bait that he was using, because it
Yeah.
was so
Don't do
unique.
it.
It
Yeah.
was so unique, what he was doing and the way that he was fishing it. I'll just say that it was very unique.
Yeah.
And he used this was actually something we talked about a lot. He was a Daiwa pro. He's from Japan, and he works with like a lot of the actual Daiwa creators.
Yeah.
And he used a
Awesome.
lot of BFS gear. He
Mm-hmm.
could throw them on a casting setup like 50 yards. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, I
Wow.
can't tell you the amount of times where just watching the way that he used a fishing rod, I was just like, that's impressive.
Yeah. So he had that really dialed in. And I find from the back of the boat, one of my favorite things about it is fishing with guys who have super diverse approaches. And you just,
Well, yeah.
even if it's not the way you fish, you learn so much. And maybe you just pick up a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and it helps us all. So that's
Yeah,
cool.
100%. And um like around here, I have a local river system called the
Hmm.
Gasconade. That's like a big smallmouth body of water. And
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you right now, what he showed me, I'm gonna try it down there,
Yeah.
and I'll get back to you, because
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna catch some smallies on it.
Yeah. That's awesome.
But we started out, and again, it was kind of similar to my day before. I mean, we took off, not a super far run, and we fished in an area, again, just like going back to Truman Lake. if if I wasn't if I know all of Truman Lake, and I'm not gonna go fish in the bushes, and I'm not gonna go fish a point, there's like one particular area where you can go, and the fish are just gonna go be reliable during high water.
Okay.
And he found an area that was literally the exact same thing.
Wow.
And it took me like probably a good hour to realize that we were in that area, but I
Hmm.
kind of like looked around, and all of a sudden I was just like, I know exactly where we're like the
Yeah.
situation that we're in right now. And we're fishing some steeper banks, and the fish were just going up and down them with the flooding. Like the water was consistently rising. Like through the tournament, it rose 6 foot. It was rising like a foot and a half through the day and another foot and a half through the night. It was averaging like a good 2.5 feet a day, like full rise.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that steeper banks, I think for a lot of people was just something that they were looking for, because that's just something you can depend on for the fish to rise and fall faster, or
Yeah.
more well equipped, I should say, more
Yeah.
unaffected.
Yeah, I think out here, we have some spotted bass lakes like Lake Shasta and some others
Yeah.
where on steep bluff walls they tend to just, hang tight sometimes, suspend adjacent to and just move up and down like that.
Hmm.
So I can kind of relate to what you're saying. So that's interesting.
And so again, very similar to my first day, we got into our area, and it was like 15 or 20 minutes. He caught his first keeper, and it was probably a 3.25 pound smallmouth, a really nice smallmouth.
Yeah.
And I was immediately just like, oh man, like, all right, I might need to try some of that finesse stuff. And
Hmm.
this is kind of where this little dude comes in. Um, Probably one of
Yeah.
my all-time favorite confidence baits, whether it's on a jig head like this or just flipping it, because I love to flip a 4-inch tube.
Okay.
Like, love it, love it. I caught the biggest bass I've ever caught out of Lake the Ozarks last year flipping a tube. Like,
Awesome.
it's a really fun bait for me. It's a bait I fish with a lot of confidence.
Yeah.
And so I
And
picked it up on.
they're
Go ahead.
sorry, I was just going to say they're a little bit in vogue right now because it's one of those trends where a few people are doing it and fish don't see them as much as a creature bait.
Yeah.
I've fished behind somebody out here who's a big tube fan, a few years ago when almost nobody was doing this, and it can be pretty effective. So he was flipping a tube, and it's a pretty impressive day.
So like again, this just kind of goes back to my dad.
Yeah.
Um, Growing up, and I mean like as young as I can ever remember, that was one of my dad's confidence baits. That was a bait that he always seemed to be able to get consistently bit on no matter where he went. He could usually find some fish on a tube. They might be biting better on a brush hog or worm, but he could always get bit on the tube. And that's just something that I never forgot about. And I think it was about like 2 or 3 years ago,
Yeah.
we just stopped throwing it. And
Yeah.
then I don't know why, but spring spring 2024 came, and I picked it up and just started smacking them. Literally everywhere I went, just like the old days. And I mean, I was catching some
Wow.
big ones. I caught them on. I had two back-to-back tournaments on Truman, and team tournaments. I got like sixth out of like 100 plus boats, and then I got, I think, second in the next one I fished. And we were just, I mean, we were whacking them. And again, like you touched on earlier, there's just still not a lot of people that throw it.
Yeah.
And it's a super simple profile, and they don't miss it. If you get bit on a tube, I mean, sometimes you'll get the dum dum, or if you're specifically if you're around smallmouth, they like to really mess with it.
Yeah.
They'll burp 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 burp. They almost feel like a bluegill sometimes, but
Yeah.
it just seems like they always end up eating it.
Yeah.
It's just a bait I fish with a lot of confidence.
And confidence is so important. Was that what you flipped on day one as well, or was that a brush hog or something?
So I did catch one flipping a tube on day one, but I caught all
Hmm.
my fish on different baits. Like I caught one on a
Yeah.
Senko, I
Okay.
caught one on a brush hog, and I caught one on a tube. Like there was nothing
Yeah.
really super particular about it. I think it was more so just I flipped it on its head, and there he was.
Yeah. You put it in the right place
Yeah,
consistently. Yep.
but no, day two, he caught his first keeper, and I picked that tube up. And I mean, I proceeded to just go on a tear. I caught three keepers in like 15 minutes. And my third one was like almost a 4 pound largemouth, or probably
Wow.
maybe a 4 pound largemouth.
Yeah.
And I was just sitting back here like, oh my god. And I gave Hero a tube. Like he came over to
Hmm.
me after he netted the second fish, and he was like, can I see your bait? And
Yeah.
I held it up, and he kind of was looking at it, and I gave him one. And um this is not the exact color. I was using a
Yeah.
black neon
Yeah.
tube, but a
Hmm.
3.5 inch Arky tube. Like I literally got them at Walmart, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. That's
like
cool.
that Arky tube. God, I don't know what it is. They put it on the package though. It's something like Bass Love It, and let me tell you, they do. They
Yeah.
ate the snot out of that thing on day two. I caught three keepers straight. I had that big small or that bigger fish that I thought was a smallmouth tangle me up around that brush pile and break me off. I retied a tube, and within another 20 minutes, I caught two more keepers. I mean, it
Wow.
was it was just dumb. And
Yeah.
the only thing that I was doing was I just fished at a little bit different angle, and I fished slower. I fished a little bit steeper off the bank to where he was fishing a little bit higher up on the bank.
Okay.
And it just kind of like I said earlier, having fished a familiar area, I kind of knew that the fish rose and fall up and down that bank. So I just fished a
Hmm.
little bit deeper.
Yeah. So, and to help me kind of understand the scenario, like you mentioned, there was some brush, but the water's like chocolate milk, right? It still is that right?
So
Or is there
the
better
water,
visibility at this point?
um, and this will just be like a Kentucky Lake Barkley thing in general.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
feel like feel like across the board, this was known through the field. So I'm not really giving away anything here.
Okay. Got it.
When you get that much rain, if you look at how it lays out, there's going to be the least amount of runoff. Whether you're on Lake Barkley, it's going to be your west side of the lake. If you're on Kentucky Lake, it's going to be your east side of the lake. Anywhere where that
Hmm.
land between the lakes is, there's going to be significantly less runoff. That water's going to clear up faster.
Hmm. Hmm.
And when they were pulling the water as hard as they were, um, I mean, all those waters were cleaning up quite a bit faster. And the particular area we were fishing was steep enough and rocky enough where it didn't have much runoff to begin with, and really the only color that was in there was
Got it.
was blowing in off the main lake and coming in from a creek.
So were you actually pitching the tube to targets you could see visibly, or just putting it in the sort of the distance from the bank that you were talking about, and just fishing that kind of that column?
I was fishing. I was fishing. We were fishing like more or less what I would say is we were fishing like a 45-degree angle bank. It was fairly steep, and um, I hate to even put it like this, but the biggest thing that I capitalized on from where we were on the bank was any time that and like I said, it didn't happen very many times, but I think it happened like specifically two of the keepers that I caught came this way. Is like when he would get hung up and take the boat all the way to the bank, and it seemed like I could cast parallel to the bank about 10 foot off. It just seemed like that was like 10 foot off the bank, whatever depth column that was in. And in all
Yeah.
honesty, I hate to say it, but that was one thing I actually I had to talk to Hero about for most of the day during day two to run conversions for the graphs. He left them
Oh,
on for me. but they were in meters and Celsius, and um, I can't do conversions like that in my head,
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
especially not water temperature wise. Like that one was the one that really threw me for a loop, especially in the springtime. You know, water temperature plays such a key role.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um, that was just, I don't know. I actually might have been catching most of my fish in 4 foot of water. I might have actually been catching most of my fish in like 9 foot of water. But
yeah.
it just seemed
But
like there
but a
was,
little unclear because you were looking at the metric system all day.
yeah. But for the
Yeah,
most part, I would say I was just making a line about 10 foot
yeah,
off the bank. The most efficient anytime I could make the most maximum efficiency cast, I was almost guaranteed to get a bite in that area.
yeah. Got it. So let's so you mentioned, I think I heard an interview where you mentioned catching a couple good fish late. I'm not sure if those are the ones you already mentioned,
Nope, I
but
have I haven't gotten there yet.
okay. Okay, got it. So let's touch on those, and then I guess day 3, which was
Yeah.
amazing, for several reasons, I'm sure.
Hey, sorry about that. My
Hey,
phone
hey,
died.
no worries. So you were about to finish with day 2 and then talk a little bit about day 3?
So I was just about to tell you about the end of my day on day two.
Yeah.
So during the day we fished a section of riprap where I caught my first coal. I caught it on a DT6 in a crawl color.
Yeah.
Um, and in all honesty, I couldn't tell you exactly what the color was. I was gonna have one here
That's
to
okay.
show you, but it's somewhere else. I don't even know where it's at.
Yeah.
But so later on that evening, in the section of riprap was fairly close to takeoff. We drove back to the area where we were going to take out of, and mind you, this is, I feel, kind of an important part of the day. When we fished this section of riprap, I caught that first keeper on a crankbait. Hero said, "Crankbait?" Like question mark. Picked up his crankbait and immediately caught a 5 pounder on his first cast on that section of riprap.
Ooh. So you
And
helped
so
him out.
yeah, I helped him out. And then also there was one point during that time where I hooked up with one that I think could have also been another big one
Yeah.
on a crankbait. And it just came unbuttoned, and that happens, especially with a
Yeah,
crankbait.
for
But
sure.
we showed up at the end of the day, and I mean it was like last minute. We came in at like 2:42. Our check-in was at 3 o'clock. We came up this bank and we got kind of towards the end of it. I set the hook on one. It was a 4 pounder. I put it in the box, throw a fish out, and I mean, like as soon as I throw the other fish out, Hero is calling for the net,
Hmm.
and I net his fish. We put it in the boat. Turn around. I think it was my third cast. I made it at like 2:53. I mean, we had minutes to spare. I mean, like nothing.
Yeah.
And I hooked up with another one that was just, it was a big one. Almost another 4 pounder. And got it in the boat and put my life jacket on.
Yeah.
Hero started the big motor, and I mean, I was culling just like he was idling out of the cove. I was culling, and then we ran and checked
Yeah.
in. I mean, it
Yeah.
was it was literally that fast. I mean, some last minute never give up heroics. I mean, that's really
Yeah.
what it was. It was some crazy stuff.
That's awesome. It's nice to have an experience like that every once in a while.
Oh, I mean, it was just, one of those times where you feel like it's made to be your day.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's your time. And it could have been your time for the win. It sounds like if you were able to boat a couple more of those. But I have a
Yeah.
feeling you'll find your way up there sooner or later.
Well,
But
we got the Toyota Series later this year back on the home pond, and we'll
yep.
see how that one goes.
Yeah. You know, that would be great. I noticed that the AOY race is super close.
Yeah,
So you're, if I remember correctly, you're like in fourth or something like that.
yeah,
And there's like five or six guys within 25 points of each other. And I also noticed, I think Dan Bowman's in first. If you look back at his history, he has not fished quite as well in the fall at Lake of the Ozarks compared to the spring.
yeah.
So, and obviously it's anybody's game when it's that close. So it should be exciting.
I mean, and I can tell you from firsthand experience, your boater in the fall will make or break you. Um,
Uh, so it's draw dependent, big time.
uh, yeah, just because particular, kind of touching on that forward facing sonar thing, if you get really faced, off the bank where somebody's trying to throw at a particular brush pile, and
Yeah,
you know, nothing against those guys. I've been around it. I've done it myself. Um, it's
it
just
just happens. Yeah,
sometimes when, especially when you're up there and you're on the trolling motor, you get so laser focused in. It's hard to kind of divert and kind of, you know, for lack of a better way to put it, it's hard to give advice to that guy in the back of the boat of like, well, this is what I would try to do if I were you, because it's,
totally.
sometimes it's just really difficult. If those guys go to the lower end and they get on some of those brush piles and in that real deep water, personally speaking, I mean that's like my nightmare.
Yeah,
I'm not really comfortable in a deep water setting, but you know, there's definitely a two-way double-edged sword there.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's I think that's everybody's nightmare to some extent, but from the back of the boat. But it sounds like dinner is on the way there. I don't want to keep you for too long,
Yeah.
and then try to get you up to dinner. How's that sound?
No, you're all right. We'll definitely talk about day three. Um,
Okay.
at the end of the start of day three starts at the pre-tournament or the last day meeting on day two. Um,
Yeah.
you know, I wasn't, especially the heat of the tournament's going on. A lot of the times we don't really get to sit around and watch what's going on at the scales as either boaters or co-anglers.
Yeah.
And so I didn't watch Fisher and I weigh in the biggest bag of the tournament from the front of the boat on day two, just like I did from the back of the boat on day two.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really know that happened until
Mm-hmm.
they said it at the end of the day, and it was like okay. And then I met him, and I was like, awesome. It's like, and
Yeah.
nothing against the older crowd, but it's just like when I go fishing with my friends, they're
Yep.
my age.
Yep.
And I just, especially, I mean, I think we clicked instantly. Like we met at the pre-tournament meeting, and um, I think we just told each other like we're gonna go catch some fish. Like we're in second place, let's chase them down. Let's go. Let's just go out there and do our thing.
Yeah.
And
That's cool.
um, he told me he told me where he was running. He told me he was going to Paris, and I mean that's no secret anymore. I mean everybody can see it from the pictures posted on MLF.
Yeah.
Alan Gray even talked about that on the weigh-in stage. There's no secret about it.
Yeah.
But he told me where we were going, and I was like, "Well, heck, I got a day of practice down there." In my head, I was thinking, "Well, I watched some fish down there eat a Carolina rig," and that was a big part of my strong suit, and that was a big part of my detriment on day three. I'm This kind of
Really.
goes back to what I was saying earlier about that deep water stuff. Like a Carolina rig is just not a strong bait for me. Um,
Yeah. Same here. I don't enjoy fishing it, but
oh, but I can tell you this much: the amount of bites I had that day from the back of the boat
mm-mm.
spoke volumes. That's definitely worth mentioning. But
Yeah.
I would say out of the six keepers I lost, I probably lost four of them on a Carolina rig.
Oh man.
But the big part of day three for me was just, you know, not letting myself get too tired of anything. Like I did catch a keeper on my tube, you know. I threw around a lot of different baits, just trying to, because the area we were at, and we could see him on the live scope and stuff, and Fisher was looking for him and whatever, and he was very vocal. He let me know
Hmm.
anytime where he thought he saw the school
Hmm.
is, basically like I said earlier, and Fisher was a great example of this. As far as the forward facing sonar goes, is he just told me straight up. He said, "Don't cast over my line. You're not going to cause a problem." He said it
Yeah.
was literally, and there was a couple different times he asked me. He was like, "Did I throw over your line?" And I was like, "No,
Yeah.
no, you're
Yeah.
fine." Like, it's just, it is
Yeah.
what it is. Like we were just, in all honesty, I kind of felt like we were just two buddies in the boat fishing. It was a great day.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. I've been in the boat with a couple guys fishing forward facing sonar in tournaments who had a similar approach, invited me to cast forward. Same thing, don't cast over my line. And they shared a lot of information,
Yeah,
and it's that's like a night and
it's
day experience from the
yeah,
what you
it's
were
easy to have
describing
a
with the brush piles.
it's very
Yeah.
easy to have a pleasant experience in a situation like that.
Yep. Totally. But that said, I don't fault the guys who are, let's say they're fishing a single brush pile, and
Oh no, no,
maybe it's a
not
little
not
windy,
not at
and
all.
are
I
having a
mean,
hard time holding the boat in place. There's only so many things you can think about at once, and so it is what it is.
and I mean, just as fishermen, especially as tournament fishing, especially as people in the back of the boat, we got to understand they paid their money to fish this
Yeah,
tournament.
totally.
They're gonna do what they feel like they got to do to catch a bass. I mean, that's the bottom
Yep.
line. It is our job from the back of the boat to figure out what we got to do behind them. You know,
Yeah.
that's we're just gonna have to deal with the circumstances.
Yep. Yep. Totally. So, so day 3, you lost a few. They were eating the Carolina rig. What do you think it mattered what bait you had on the Carolina rig, or was it more just the presentation? They
Um,
would have eaten anything.
I think for myself anyway, I saw we tried a couple different baits in practice. Like I said, we did quite a bit of Carolina rigging in practice, and
Yeah.
the main bait was just the brush hog. It seemed like,
Yeah.
and they wanted a full sized one. They wanted the profile. The water was kind of dingy. They wanted a full profile, and they
Hmm.
definitely, there was just something about that brush hog. I don't know what it is, but it's a fish catching machine, coast to coast.
Yep. Yep. They like it out here too, and I've always wondered. It doesn't, like from the human perspective, it doesn't look like it should catch them as much as some of the other things you could throw on there, but they love it. So
Oh my gosh, I don't. I think it's been a lifelong debate. I think there's been 100 different anglers that'll tell you over and over and over again. They're just die hard. It imitates a bluegill. You'll have a different guy tell you
yeah.
it imitates a gizzard shad. And I'm gonna
Yep.
tell you, my opinion is I don't care. The fish eat it, and they eat it nonstop
Yeah.
wherever you are. It just throw a brush hog.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. I watched you weigh in on day 3. I could see you were elated just to be there,
But
which,
yeah,
it's so cool. Um, and sometimes, if you're in that position and you're maybe 6 pounds back, uh, some people have that perspective that, it's just awesome to be here. It wasn't that close. Maybe it's better that it wasn't that close, but it sounds like you lost some pretty good fish.
I I
So that
definitely
must have been a little frustrating.
I definitely I definitely had a couple different frustrations, but again, it's just like, look at the tournament as a whole. I mean, look at, like I touched on earlier. I drew boaters that fished in the top 10 all 3 days. Like, and especially, I just look at the last day like this. I might have lost 6 keepers, but I still put a limit in the boat. Like that that was my main focus. I didn't want to lose ground.
Yep.
And I probably could have made it a little bit tighter. I maybe could have won, maybe, but I mean, I can say this too. I saw a couple different fish that I lost, and I mean, hats off to Dan Bowman. He had a big lead.
Yeah.
I still just I don't know if I would have quite touched him.
Well, congratulations. That's an awesome result. My best finish in a Toyota series to date was sixth. So I've yet to crack the top five, but it's gonna happen sooner or later. Although they're not here on the West Coast anymore, so I'm gonna have to
Dang.
start flying out in your direction.
Well, come
But
on.
hey, yeah, that's awesome. And by the way, when you do go up there for dinner, tell your dad that if I ever run into him, I'll buy him a beer for letting you hang on to the podcast for a little bit longer. But
Oh, he doesn't
yeah,
care. He doesn't understand what a podcast is.
old school. That's okay. So, hey, two super quick questions, and then we can wrap it up. Number one, your plans for the future. I suspect you may be interested in moving to the pointy end of the boat at some point.
But yeah,
Is that
I
in the cards?
that's I mean I I I talked to I talked to one of my boaters about this actually at Lake of the Ozarks in the very first event this year in the Plains Division, and he was a great gentleman. Forgive me for not remembering his name, but he
That's okay.
asked me. He said, what's your plans for the future?" And I just told him, I said, as honest as I can be, my 5-year plan is I would love to be a guide in the Ozarks. I'd love to, like, particularly myself. I drive I drive an 18-foot all-wheel jet boat with a 150
Mm-hmm.
Mercury on it. I like to run skinny water. I like to get where other people aren't going. You know, I like to get in close to the cover. Like, I don't care if my boat bounces off of a stick or something like that. I'm about a real
Yeah,
fishing experience. I love it. And that's something I would love to share with the rest of the world. But yeah, man, I would love to be fishing for a living one day soon.
cool. Well, you're headed in the right direction, and I hope that works out.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that get talked about in the Ozark Mountains. You got Table Rock Lake, you've got Palm de Terre Lake, Stockton Lake, Truman, Lake of the Ozarks is a very obvious one.
Yeah,
But we've got some of the most incredible river systems, as far as I'm concerned, in the country. The Gasconade River has got absolutely trophy smallmouth in it that go borderline untouched all year long. Um, and it's God, it can be so fun sometimes. They're river fish. I mean, like the type of
yeah,
stuff you watch Ot Defoe do on Facebook. You've got to run through a shoal in 6 inches of water to go through the next deep hole, and it's
yeah, yeah,
fun. I mean, it's it's an awesome thing to experience.
yeah, yeah. That's super cool. Well, awesome. And then we talked a little bit about the rest of the year. You got the Plains Division finale at Lake of the Ozarks in, I think it's late September. So
Yeah,
good luck with that, and hope you smash them.
I
And
mean, like you touched on it
go
earlier,
ahead.
we got a tight race, and y- and I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure all of the people that are really in that race are from the Ozark region. Um, but we're just gonna go put up our dukes and get down to it.
Yeah.
See what happens.
All right, man. Noah, that sounds awesome. I want to wish you the best, and again, thanks for coming on the show and sharing so much about your experience at Kentucky Lake. I think other co-anglers will really enjoy this.
Well, I
And
appreciate you, Matt. It's people like you that let other co-anglers hear these experiences.
yeah, thanks, man. I and downstream from this, so we're trying to build out a website that's got information about fish and lakes all over the country, and ideally will help co-anglers prep for their events. And if you have any ideas about, what you'd like to see to help you, I mean, I suspect your viewpoint is that, like most, and including mine, that spending time on the water is the most important thing.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely.
but but I do think there's some things you can do, with maps and, and prep before you
Oh,
get there that also help at
absolutely. I mean,
at the margin.
I may have borderline touched on this earlier, but really the thing there is just each each season has its own thing it has its each condition that's going to play the biggest role. Like in the spring, it's probably going to be your water temperature. Water temperature is
Yep.
probably going to play a bigger factor than water color or where the
Yep.
bait's at. If you can, that's all secondary to what's the water temperature. Or in versus in the fall, it's I don't care if the water's warm or hot. Where's the bait?
Where's the bait? Yep.
Yeah,
Same out here.
that's
Yep.
I think that's just kind of as fishermen know, that's just how it goes. There's different things that are the biggest keys during each season.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that makes sense. Well, we'll see how this evolves, and I wish you the best of the luck for the rest of the year. Thanks for coming on, and and go get that dinner. Okay, man.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it, Matt.
You've been listening to CoAngler's Garage with Noah Dickneite, the runner-up finisher in the 2025 Toyota Series Pro-Am at Kentucky Lake. I hope you've enjoyed the podcast. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and also come find us on social media and at coanglersgarage.com. Thanks so much. See you next time.